Hello and welcome to the editorial analysis of the Hindu. Today we shall be discussing the editorial of the 14th of March. So coming to the first article, down but definitely not out. Now the context here is with regards to the extinction of the Islamic State. A similar article is what we had discussed yesterday also, but some new points are what are available in this editorial. So I have picked up this editorial for discussion. Now coming to the issues, the first issue is that of lost sheen. Now, this caliphate of the Islamic State, which appeared formidable, has finally lost its sheen, is what has been discussed here. According to several experts nationally as well as internationally, it has been well confirmed that the Islamic State has met its extinction and the war against the Islamic State is what has been won. Now, something that has been given in the data, some important data that has been given in the editorial is with regards to two cities after the capture of which the sheen is what was lost. These two major cities were firstly Raqqa in Syria and the second city is the city of Mosul in Iraq. So these are the two cities that we can remember and we can replicate them in our answers. The second issue which is important is the issue of coalition of forces. Now this war against the Islamic State is what has been won by the Syrian Democratic Forces and the dedicated Kurdish fighters. Now, this idea of a coalition of forces is what was given by the US, and this is what led to the formation of the Syrian Democratic Forces, which collectively fought against the Islamic State. So, this is something that you should know. The third issue is that of safe sanctuaries. Now, as we had discussed yesterday also, a complete elimination of Islamic State is something that has not happened as yet. It is being believed that they still have some safe sanctuaries. It is being estimated in the article that in the northeastern part of Syria, there are approximately estimated of 60,000 soldiers of the Islamic State who are still continuing. So this is something that is being feared. Another thing that has been highlighted is that several of the fighters of the Islamic State might have passed into other countries because of the percolent borders of these countries. They might have entered other countries and there is a chance that this might resurge in future. So some safe sanctuaries, some safe havens is what still continues to exist for the Islamic State. The next issue is that of temptation to dismiss. Now, the editorial is discussing that because of the fact that Islamic State, the war against the Islamic State has been so long drawn, there is a huge temptation across the world to completely dismiss the Islamic State. But this, the editorial is saying, should not happen. This hurry in dismissing it, it should not happen. Rather, it should be ensured that these safe havens are what are cracked down upon. The chances for its resurgence is completely wiped out. Only then can we completely dismiss the Islamic State. Until then, the government will have to be wary and it will have to adopt some restraint is what has been highlighted. Next topic, which is very, very important, is the issue of Shamima Begum. Now, it is for this particular point that I have particularly picked up this article. Now, what happened here was that Shamima Begum, she was a UK born, a British born teenager, and in the year 2015, she left UK to join the Islamic State. Now, after that, for staying with the Islamic State for many years, now she has called for help back from her country and she has said that she wants to come back to her country. At present, she is only 19 years old and in this entire stay in Islamic State, she says she has lost 3 children. So this is something that is a case of compassion that is required. And an issue that has happened here is that the UK government, that the British government has denied her to re-enter into UK. It has taken away her citizenship and her resettlement, re-entry into UK is what has been denied by the Foreign Secretary of UK. So this is what leads to an ethical issue, and a question in this regard is what can be asked in the ethics paper. Also, if a question is not asked, you must use such kind of ethical examples in your answers. So these are some practical examples which give a good understanding of ethics. Now, what is the ethical dilemma that has arisen? This is also called as the modern dilemma. This dilemma is that what should take up a precedence by the government? Should the government go ahead with its role of compassion, or should it go ahead with its need to combat terror? And this is one dilemma that is going to come before almost all the countries. This also happens in the case of refugees. This also is a dilemma in the case of death penalty. So this dilemma is something that continuously emerges. Now, in this case, you need to understand that it was the responsibility of the state to prevent the youth from getting radicalized. If this young girl at a vulnerable age of say 15 to 16 years, if at that particular age, this girl got carried away by the propaganda that the Islamic State was running online, then it was the responsibility of the state to ensure that there should be some protection, there should be some degree of counseling of such children, and for that matter of such teenagers. So if the state has failed in this regard, then why should the sole blame go on these girls? That is one issue. The second issue is that at the time when this girl contacted the government of UK, at that point of time she had a child with her, and this was the prime responsibility of the government to protect the child, because the child was innocent, and not only that, the child was a citizen of the UK. Now the state has not even provided any services or protection to the child, is what is being criticized against the state, and the child had eventually succumbed to his illness, and that is something that is gone against the state. But the state in its defense has said that it was not possible for the government of UK at that point of time to send a team to Syria to protect the child. So in this case, the opinion should be that definitely a wrong step is what has been taken by Shamima Begum. It is undeniable, but now it is time for the state to act more responsibly, show more compassion is what is required. Also, the entire system of a civilized country should be reformative rather than retributive. So in ensuring that the life of this person is what is saved, it should ensure that reformation is what should happen, and as a result of which the state should act more compassionately is what is the final opinion that we should have in such matters. Another thing that is very, very important in this editorial is that of a case study. Now the editorial says that the Islamic State is a perfect case study on how the extremist ideology of any kind can act as a magnet for the young minds. This can be even proven in the case of Naxalism in India, or for that matter in the case of rising insurgency in Jammu and Kashmir. In all these cases, what we are seeing is that the youth is getting radicalized. So what is important here is to understand that how this entire policy, or for that matter the entire propaganda or the extremist ideology, is somehow attractive to the youth. This is largely because the youth is somehow seeking some adventure, and also at this vulnerable age it is seen that the youth is often frustrated with the current scenario. So in that case the youth seeks change, and as a result of which this youth gets magnetized towards such ideology. But the Islamic State, the example of the Islamic State, is a perfect example to wean away the youth from such ideology by showing to the youth that as soon as this ideology attracts, similarly it is even more swift in its disenchantment, and the case of Shamima Begum is an ideal one. So this should be used as a case study in explaining and giving more clarity to the youth is what has been analyzed here. The next issue which has been analyzed is the issue of instability in West Asia. Now this is something that we had discussed yesterday also. Definitely West Asia is going through several high degree of instability. Yesterday we had discussed that this instability is there in Syria, but today a new example is what has been given, that of Yemen. Now there is civil war going on in Yemen, and if this civil war is what continues, then this is a minefield for the resurgence of Islamic State. So steps should be taken to ensure peace in West Asia. Case of Afghanistan is also what is mentioned, that because there was no stability in Afghanistan, as a result of which Taliban till date is what is continuing in Afghanistan. So this is something, these are some examples which can be used vis-a-vis the analysis of the resurgence of Islamic State. Now this editorial is something that is very, very important. First and foremost, it is important for bilateral relations, but also this case of Shamima Begum is a case of ethics, and this is a question that can be asked, so that is the relevance. Coming to the next article, heavy-handed order. Now the context here is that recently the Meghalaya High Court has given an order where it has found the editor and publisher of the Shillong Times guilty of contempt, and the punishment that has been given is a harsh one. So in that context, this entire editorial is what has been written. Now coming to the important issues, the first issue is with regards to the punishment. Now the punishment that has been given is a hard one, as I mentioned. It's according to the punishment, there is a fine that has been imposed of 2 lakh each on the editor as well as on the publisher, and in the case of failure to pay this particular fine, there is a scope of jail term. The judge has said that they will be given a jail term. Not only that, the judge has also threatened that the newspaper can also get banned, is what is the complete punishment that has been given to them. So indeed this punishment is a harsh one, and that is something that has been analyzed. The second issue is that of the jurisdiction of the courts. Now there is no doubt that the courts definitely have under their jurisdiction to issue a contempt order, but the issue here is that they do not have any right to ban a particular newspaper is what has been highlighted. So what is being analyzed here is that this is probably a case of overstepping the mandate of the judiciary. And another thing which has been highlighted here is that the court in its judgment has passed comments about the past records of this particular newspaper. It has been critical of its news, of several news which were not under the scope of this contempt that has been filed. So this is something that the editorial is discussing, is amounting to a personal view of the judge against the newspaper, which is irresponsible. So that is something that has been highlighted here. The third issue is about the case in question. Now, what had actually happened was that the state government in Meghalaya had withdrawn some facilities that were to be given to the retired judges. Now, the court in this case intervened and it restored these facilities that were to be given to the retired judges. These facilities were some facilities like a domestic help, or that matter some mobile funds to be given, mobile bills that were to be paid of these judges. So these kind of monetary benefits are what were to be given to the retired judges. So in light of this entire scenario, what happened was that this particular newspaper, that is the Shillong Times, it published an article where it criticized the order of the court, and the court in return took cognizance of it, and it filed a contempt against the court, against this particular newspaper, that it has done a contempt against the decision of the court, is what happened. So this is the entire case that is in question. This next issue that is important is the issue of preserving the dignity of the judiciary. Now, it is this aspect which is very, very important for us. Here you should know that the editorial is suggesting that in light of maintaining the dignity of the judiciary should also show some restraint, especially against journalists and against the activists who often criticize some judgments also. In the past, a good statement is what has been given, a quote is what has been given, that in the past several courts have said that the court's shoulders are broad enough to shrug off these kind of petty comments against the courts. So it is such kind of a stand that the court should take, rather than a stand that is extremely aggressive, and rather a stand that is extremely exploitative, as is this one. So that is something that has been highlighted. Another issue which is important, which has been discussed here, is using contempt law sparingly. Now, yesterday also we had discussed the Official Secrets Act, and there also I had told you that such kind of laws in itself are not good, because there is a high chance of their frequent misuse. Now, even the contempt law is something that is given to the courts, but this law is something that has to be used very, very sparingly and in the rarest of the rare cases. Here the use of this law is what is appearing irresponsible, and that is something that has been highlighted. Another thing that is going to be important vis-a-vis this entire discussion is that we can use this particular case as an example of oppression of the press. A question in this regard can be expected, because yesterday we had discussed Official Secrets Act, and now this is another case that has come. So such kind of question is what can come, and if such kind of a question does come, then in that case we can give this particular example. This is going to be a good example, and that is what is going to be its utility and relevance. Now, coming to the next article, a model policy for women in the police. Now, this is a very, very important article. The context is the same. That is, it is talking about a model policy for women in the police. Now, some issues are what have been discussed. Coming to the first issue is that of the strength of women in the police. Now, all over India, the strength of women in the police department at present is only 7%. And this is despite the fact that there is a provision for 30% reservation for women in states as well as union territories. So definitely this strength is something that is very minimal, and this is something that needs to be increased. The second issue is that of patriarchy in the institution. Now, the editorial discusses that police department and this entire institution is one institution where patriarchy is very deep rooted. Therefore, reservation alone is not a solution for reforming this institution. Rather, uprooting of these patriarchal ideas are what needs to be implemented till today. So this is something that has been highlighted. The third issue is that of a model policy that has been recommended. Now, here the editorial says that there is need for making policing inclusive, non-discriminatory and more efficient, and laying down the foundation for equal opportunities for women, and also creating a safe and enabling environment for women. So these are what are the ideas that have been given vis-a-vis a model policy for making police a more equitable institution and making it more suitable for women to come and join as an institution. So that is what has been highlighted here. Another thing which is important is the issue of increasing their numbers, which is increasing the number of women in police, as we've spoken above also, vis-a-vis the strength of the women. Now here the editorial is discussing that even if we are providing a reservation of 30%, this is something that is not enough. Rather, steps should be taken to develop an action plan to achieve this target of 30%, or for that matter, even more than 30%. Special recruitment drives should be implemented in every district. Awareness about the opportunities for women in police is what the government should focus upon. Not only this, the focus should be upon giving women positions in the higher sections of the police department, and in higher positions there should be more and more women. At present, what is happening is that this entire institution is not a very attractive institution for women to join, and as a result of which their strength continues to be small, and this is something that has been highlighted. The other issue is that of gender stereotyping. Now, this is one institution where there is a lot of gender stereotyping. For instance, often difficult tasks are what are not assigned to women in police. Less demanding tasks are what are given to them. The women are largely deployed in desk duties as compared to difficult roles like investigative roles and other important roles. So this is something that the editorial is discussing needs to be shattered. The stereotyping is what needs to be shattered. The glass ceiling that exists in these departments for women is what needs to be done away with, is what has been highlighted here. Another thing that has been discussed is with regards to the family and childcare responsibilities. Now, it is no doubt that family and childcare responsibilities are largely shouldered by women in our country, and this is something that even the police department should acknowledge. There should be adequate internal childcare system in police departments. There should be child creches in these departments so that women can actively come and participate and become a part or find adequate employment in the police department. Also, the postings of women should be done responsibly. It should be preferred that women are posted in their home districts so that more and more women can join the police department. The next issue is that of modernization. Now, the editorial discusses that a lot of funds are what are given to the police department for their modernization. But these funds should not only be used for the modernization of their arsenal, but rather also for the modernization of the facilities which are female friendly. For example, there should be modern changing rooms. There should be separate toilets for women that should be available in police stations. So these are some facilities which need to be provided for women, is what has been discussed. Next, what is important is the issue of sexual harassment. Now, it is also very, very important that in such kind of a scenario or work environment where the ratio between men is to women is something that is very much disoriented, or for that matter the number of men are very much higher as compared to women, then what should be provided or what should be ensured is that the entire working space is what is made safe for women. There should be zero tolerance for any harassment against any particular women. Immediate steps should be taken if such complaint is what comes. And what is very, very important in a nutshell of this particular editorial is that every possible step is what should be taken towards making policing a viable career option for women, which at present is something that is missing in India. So that is the entire gist and crux of this particular editorial. This is a very, very important editorial for General Studies Paper 1, where the issue of women's is something that is directly in syllabus. A direct question can come because UPSC always likes to ask question where some application is what is required. Everybody knows that there is discrimination against women in India, but how to apply it in a particular situation is what is an important question that UPSC can ask, and this is precisely that. It talks about discrimination of women in the police, so this is something that can be asked. A very, very important article indeed. So that's all for today's discussion. I thank you all for watching the video.